What if I told you that gumbo, the soup that defines New Orleans more than any other dish, contains in a single pot the culinary traditions of West Africa, France, Spain, and the Choctaw Nation, that its name comes from the West African word for okra, that the thickening agent filet powder was taught to New Orleans cooks by the Choctaw people who had been making it from sassafras leaves for centuries, and that the first recorded gumbo recipe dates to 1802, which means gumbo is older than Louisiana statehood? That a dessert invented at Brennan's restaurant in 1951 to honor a city crime commissioner became one of the most theatrical tableside preparations in the world, served flaming, for a man whose main contribution to the city was fighting corruption? New Orleans. The Crescent City. The city that Care forgot. A city built below sea level at the mouth of the Mississippi, shaped by French colonialism and Spanish rule, and African slavery and Haitian revolution, and Sicilian immigration, and the specific conditions of a subtropical climate that made every ingredient grow differently here than it grew anywhere else. The name comes from the West African word kingombo, okra. Not from French, not from Spanish. From the Bantu languages of Central and West Africa, carried to Louisiana by the enslaved people who were brought here from Senegal, from Guinea, from the Congo, and who brought with them the knowledge of okra as a vegetable, as a thickener, and as the foundation of a specific kind of cooking. Gumbo is a synthesis. The roux, the slow-cooked mixture of fat and flour that is the base of every proper gumbo, comes from French classical cooking. The trinity of onion, celery, and bell pepper is the Cajun and Creole adaptation of the French mirepoix. The okra that gives the dish its name comes from West Africa. The filet powder, ground sassafras leaves, stirred in at the end to thicken and flavor, was taught to the French settlers by the Choctaw Nation, who had been using sassafras for centuries before European contact. The first recorded gumbo recipe dates to 1802, though it's likely the dish was around long before that. A proper New Orleans gumbo begins with a dark roux, flour and oil cooked together over medium heat, stirred constantly for 30 to 45 minutes until it turns the color of dark chocolate. The roux is the foundation. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be neglected. A burned roux requires starting over. The patience required to make a dark roux is the patience required to make good gumbo, and it is the reason that gumbo made in 45 minutes is not the same food as gumbo made in 2 hours. The story behind the name goes back to a 1929 streetcar strike, when a local restaurant offered free sandwiches to the poor boys walking the picket line. Brothers Clovis and Benny Martin had left the streetcar system to open a coffee stand and restaurant near the French Market. When 1,800 New Orleans streetcar workers went on strike in July 1929, demanding better wages and safer working conditions, the Martin brothers took their side. They announced publicly that they would feed striking workers for free. Every time a group of strikers came through the door, someone in the kitchen called out, "Here come the poor boys." The sandwich they served was built on New Orleans French bread, a specific loaf made with a soft interior and a crispy, shatterable crust baked by Leidenheimer Baking Company since 1896, unlike any other French bread in the country because the humidity of New Orleans changes the fermentation and the crust. The original po' boy was roast beef and gravy. It could also be oyster, shrimp, catfish, soft-shell crab, or any filling that could be piled into the long loaf. Dressed means with lettuce, tomato, pickles, and mayonnaise. If you order a po' boy in New Orleans and do not specify, they will ask. The question is not optional. The answer is important. The Martin Brothers coffee stand is long gone. The po' boy is not. It appears at neighborhood lunch counters that have been making the same roast beef version since the 1940s. At Domelice's on Annunciation Street, opened since the 1930s, operated by the same family, known for the fried shrimp po' boy, the line is still there on weekday afternoons. In 1906, a Sicilian immigrant named Salvatore Lupo owned a grocery store at 923 Decatur Street in the French Quarter, the Central Grocery. His customers were Sicilian farmers and workers from the nearby French market who came to buy lunch. A round loaf of sesame-seeded Sicilian bread, a selection of Italian cold cuts, cheese, and olive salad, which they would eat standing outside, juggling everything separately and making a mess. The large plates were hard to eat on the go, so one fateful day in 1906, Lupo decided to combine them in a sandwich of meat, cheese, and an olive/anchovy tapenade served on a sesame seed-studded bun, which came to be known as the muffaletta. The olive salad is the key. Chopped green and black olives, giardiniera, roasted peppers, capers, celery, garlic, and olive oil, marinated together until the flavors combine into something pungent and complex that cuts through the fat of the ham and salami, and provolone and capicola layered inside. The muffuletta is not served hot. It is served at room temperature, which is when the olive salad has had time to soak into the bread. Some argue it is better the next day, after a night in the refrigerator, when the olive oil has fully saturated the crumb. Central Grocery is still at 923 Decatur Street. It has been making the original muffuletta for 118 years. The beignet came to New Orleans with the French. A square of yeasted dough, deep-fried until puffed and golden, served immediately, buried under powdered sugar so generously applied that the first bite always sends a cloud of white across the table and onto whoever is sitting across from you. Café du Monde opened on the edge of Jackson Square in 1862 and has been serving beignets and café au lait continuously ever since. Through the Civil War, through Reconstruction, through 2 World Wars, through Hurricane Katrina, 24 hours a day, 364 days a year, closed only on Christmas Day. The beignets arrive in orders of 3, still hot from the fryer, on a plate buried in powdered sugar. The café au lait is half-strong dark roast chicory coffee and half-hot milk. The combination is the New Orleans breakfast that has been eaten on the same green-painted cast-iron chairs overlooking the Mississippi for 160 years. The powdered sugar is not optional. The beignet without the avalanche of powdered sugar is a different food. Jambalaya is a one-pot rice dish in which everything, meat, vegetables, aromatics, and rice, cooks together until the rice has absorbed all of the surrounding flavors. It is a cousin of Spanish paella and can come in both Creole and Cajun forms. Creole jambalaya includes tomatoes, while the Cajun version omits them in favor of a more robust seasoning blend. The Spanish brought rice cultivation and the paella tradition to Louisiana when Spain controlled the territory from 1762 to 1800. The French had already established the roux-based cooking and the use of local ingredients. The West African and Native American communities had contributed their own techniques. Jambalaya is what resulted when those traditions met the specific ingredients available in the Louisiana wetlands: andouille sausage, chicken, shrimp, crawfish, the holy trinity of onion, celery, and bell pepper. Jambalaya is the food of the outdoor celebration, the festival, the tailgate, the family reunion where a 100-quart pot sits on a propane burner and feeds everyone who shows up. In 1899, Jules Alciatore, the son of Antoine Alciatore, who had founded Antoine's restaurant in 1840, was trying to solve a supply problem. The European snails that appeared on the Antoine's menu had become difficult to source. Jules needed a substitute. He looked at the Gulf oysters available in the French market and developed a preparation. Oysters on the half shell, topped with a sauce of butter, herbs, breadcrumbs, and a mixture of vegetables, the exact composition of which has been a secret since 1899, and baked in a very hot oven until the topping is golden and the oyster beneath is just barely warm. He named it Oysters Rockefeller, after John D. Rockefeller, the richest man in America, because the sauce was so rich. The name has stuck for 125 years. Antoine's has served Oysters Rockefeller continuously since 1899. The restaurant claims to have served over 3 million orders. The recipe has never been published. Multiple chefs have attempted to reverse engineer it. Antoine's position is that all of them are wrong. The dish spread from Antoine's to restaurants across America. Every version is an approximation. The praline of New Orleans is not the French praline, a hard candy of caramelized almonds. It is not the Belgian praline, a chocolate confection. It is a flat, round, slightly grainy candy of sugar, cream, butter, and pecans, cooked to a precise temperature and dropped onto a sheet to cool into something that shatters slightly at the edge and yields at the center. French settlers brought the praline concept to Louisiana in the 18th century. The native pecan replaced the European almond. Cream replaced the dry caramel of the French original. The enslaved women who worked in the kitchens and streets of New Orleans refined the technique. Many of them sold pralines from street carts in the French Quarter, a practice that continued for generations after emancipation. Laura's Candies, the oldest candy shop in New Orleans, has been making pralines on St. Louis Street since 1913. The smell of pralines cooking reaches the street before you see the shop. The samples close the sale. It is 1951. Brennan's restaurant on Royal Street in the French Quarter is the most celebrated restaurant in New Orleans. Owen Brennan, the owner, has challenged his chef Paul Blanchet to create a new dessert using bananas. New Orleans was at the time the major port of entry for bananas from Central America, and the city was overflowing with them. Blanchet created a preparation: bananas sautéed in butter, brown sugar, cinnamon, and banana liqueur, then flambéed with rum at the table, served over vanilla ice cream while the flames are still going. Owen Brennan named it after Richard Foster, his friend and a prominent New Orleans businessman who had just been appointed chairman of the city's crime commission, charged with cleaning up New Orleans vice. Foster's contribution to history was fighting corruption. The dish named after him became one of the most famous desserts in America. Brennan's has served bananas Foster since 1951. The tableside preparation, the pan brought out, the butter melting, the sugar caramelizing, the rum added and ignited, the blue flame rising, the ice cream melting beneath the warm sauce, has not changed. New Orleans drinks its coffee differently from the rest of America. The difference is chicory. During the Civil War, when Union naval blockades cut off New Orleans' supply of coffee beans, the city began adding roasted chicory root to stretch the coffee supply. Chicory has no caffeine. It adds a slightly bitter, slightly woody, slightly chocolate note to the brew. When mixed with strong dark roast coffee, the result is a beverage that is darker, more complex, and more intensely flavored than standard coffee, simultaneously stronger tasting and less caffeinated. The blockades ended. The war ended. New Orleans kept the chicory. Community Coffee and Café du Monde's signature blend are both chicory blends. The Café au lait at Café du Monde, half chicory coffee blend, half hot milk, served in a bowl-sized cup, has been the standard New Orleans breakfast drink for 160 years. The rest of America has periodically discovered chicory coffee as a trend. The Sazerac is the oldest cocktail in America, or so New Orleans says, and New Orleans is not wrong about many things when it comes to food and drink. The cocktail traces to the late 1830s when a Creole apothecary named Antoine Amédée Peychaud was serving a mixture of cognac and his own brand of bitters, Peychaud's Bitters, at his pharmacy on Royal Street. He served it in an egg cup called a coquetier, which Americans anglicized into cocktail. The drink became associated with the Sazerac Coffee House on Exchange Alley, took its name from the cognac brand, Sazerac de Forge et Fils, that went into the original recipe, and evolved over decades as rye whiskey replaced cognac and absinthe gave way to Herbsaint as the glass rinse. The Sazerac is rye whiskey or cognac, Peychaud's bitters, a sugar cube, and an absinthe or Herbsaint rinse in a chilled glass, expressed with a lemon peel that is discarded rather than dropped in. It is served without ice. It is served in the specific glass. It is not modified.